have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff that should we call the Capitol Police? I mean the National Guard? Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient resources.
That is not a question of how they have been. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for.
I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, what they say, but she's saying, oh, no, it's my responsibility. I was responsible for this. Because I offered her 10,000 soldiers or National Guard, and she turned them down. And the mayor in writing, by the way, the mayor in writing turned it down, the mayor of D.C.
It is unconstitutional for any president to order the deployment of the military domestically. The law is crystal clear.
Posse comitatus.
Nailed it.
Right.
The president can make a request, and then the president can make an authorization, then there has to be a request. January 3rd or 4th, we're in the Oval Office, me, the SecDef, the chairman and Joint Chiefs of Staff, the president and Chief of Staff of the United States. President Trump authorized up to 20,000 National Guards for across the country, not just D.C., for events related to January 6th. We said, roger that, sir. That activated the chain of command. We went to Nancy Pelosi and Mayor Bowser since it's D.C. There has to be under the law, a local government
has to sign for it.
Request it. We went to her in person 2 days earlier. She said no in writing. I have Mayor Bowser's letter where she refused the additional support of the National Guard. The Capitol Police's memorandum, who report to Nancy Pelosi, that's also public now. They went, the chief of police went to them, and they said no National Guard. So President Trump could not do anything else on January 6th until those requests come.
They turned it down. I offered 10,000 because I could see, I had virtually nothing to do. They asked me to go make a speech. I could see what was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it too, and you could feel it. And I said, they ought to have some National Guard or whatever. And I offered it to her. And she now admits that she turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with her daughter because it made her into a liar. She said, I take full responsibility for January 6th.
Today we're here to discuss the security failures that occurred on January 6, 2021, and how we can prevent these failures from occurring again. I want to dive into the questions, Chief Son. In your transcribed interview, you mentioned that you met with the House Sergeant at Arms regarding the National Guard prior to January 6th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And who was the House Sergeant at Arms leading up to and on January 6th?
That would be Paul Irving.
And the House Sergeant at Arms is appointed by who?
It was appointed at that time by Speaker Pelosi.
And in your transcribed interview, you mentioned that when you first brought up the National Guard to the House Sergeant at Arms in the days leading up to January 6th, that Mr. Irving said he, quote, didn't like the optics, end quote. Is that correct?
That is correct. He referenced being concerned for optics.
And on January 6th, when you went to Mr. Irving to get his approval to call in the Guard, Mr. Irving said he would, quote, run it up the chain. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That was a telephone call. I didn't see him in person when I first made that request.
The House Sergeant at Arms is considered probably the most senior security official on the House side. When Mr. Irving says he has to, quote, run it up the chain, end quote, what did that mean?
I took that to mean his leadership chain.
And who would be his leadership chain? If he's functionally the most senior security official on the House side, correct?
That's his title. That's part of the title, the senior law enforcement official for the House of Representatives. But he would have been referring to the leadership team that goes up to Speaker Pelosi.
So the political leadership team, meaning elected officials, not another security official, is that your understanding?
That is correct, sir. He's the top security official for the House.
So running up the chain would most likely, in your opinion, is through the Speaker's office and possibly to Speaker Pelosi? That
would be where it ends, yes.
Okay, so let's park that there, and then let's jump to a second set here. In a press conference on January 7th, Speaker Pelosi called for your resignation on national television. Speaker Pelosi also stated that she had not talked to you since the initial breach of the Capitol. But according to your transcribed interview, you were on the phone with Speaker Pelosi a few times. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, that is correct. I spoke to Speaker Pelosi 3 times that evening, and she went on national TV and said I'd never spoken to her, but I spoke to her 3 times. The three times were the first time when I went over to brief Vice President Pence at the secure location. I'd called House Sergeant Arms Irving, told him I was going over to brief the Vice President. I was also going over to do a personal assessment of the Capitol. At that point, things were getting under control. Went over there, briefed him on when we can get them back into chambers with, Mr. Irving being fully aware. He said he wanted to get Speaker Pelosi on the phone. He made a phone call from his cell phone at approximately 5:34, where I first briefed Speaker Pelosi. The second call was when I left that location. As I was walking away, I met up with Mr. Stenger, and we started walking over to the Senate to go brief the Senate. When Jennifer Hemingway, I believe it was Jennifer Hemingway, handed me the cell phone, and it was Emily Barrett's cell phone calling her, and it was Speaker Pelosi on the other line. This is my second call with Speaker Pelosi, questioning the information I'd given to Vice President Pence about when we can get back into chambers. I assured her that information was correct. I could get them back into chambers by 7 p.m., and the call ended. That was call number 2. Call number 3 was 6:25 p.m. I was over at the Senate from the secure location, from where the Senate had been sequestered, and on a cell phone using Robert Karam's cell phone, they dialed leadership, who was over off-site at a secure location, and I briefed all of the leadership of the plans to get them back into chambers. That would have been call number 3 with Speaker Pelosi.
So you didn't have 1 call, you didn't have 2 calls, you had 3 calls. So Speaker Pelosi's comments that she didn't speak to you are inaccurate.
That is correct, sir.
Let me shift gears and go back as it relates to the optics of bringing people up to Capitol Hill and running things up the chain of command, ultimately to the Speaker's office. Do you think Speaker Pelosi's office or Speaker Pelosi herself politicized Capitol security?
I have no idea on that, sir.
Okay. Any other clarifications you'd like to make as it relates to Speaker Pelosi's comments that you didn't speak to her?
I just, wish she had considered that, wish she had considered some of the stuff that I've faced and the efforts I went through to bring in the outside resources on that day before she called for her resignation.
Thank you very much for being here. I yield back.
The genesis of the mainstream media's Get Trump narrative has been insurrection in court and insurrection in the public media view to kneecap Donald Trump. What just happened is Molly Hemingway's great reporting broke a critical piece of evidence that destroys the insurrection narrative. The January 6th committee withheld and suppressed a transcript from a senior Secret Service officer that completely corroborates what we have said on your show and what we have been saying for years. Me, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman and Joint Chiefs of Staff, and so many other officials, that days before January 6th, Donald Trump authorized 10,000 National Guardsmen and women. Multiple people testified to that, including me, in front of committees and grand juries under oath, but the mainstream media hid it, and the committee suppressed Tony Ornato's transcript, and it just came out thanks to Molly Hemingway, corroborating everything we've been saying. Liz Cheney and Adam Schiff buried this exculpatory evidence of Donald Trump.
I want to go back and reset exactly what happened, the facts, and then we'll talk about how they buried what they said first is a lie, and then how they buried the truth. So tell me exactly what happened here.
So Tony Ornato, a career Secret Service officer, a political figure, was employed at the White House as a senior security official, as we say, seconded from the Secret Service. He was in charge of presidential protection. He was there in the White House on January 6th, on January 5th, on January 4th. And in this interview, which he gave to the January 6th committee 2 years ago, he stated, and everybody should read this interview for themselves, repeatedly, that himself and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows had multiple conversations that day talking about when President Trump, days before, had authorized the National Guard up to 10 and 20,000. He stated that to the committee under oath, and they buried his transcript from public release.
When he said he verified the 10,000, how does he know? What position was he in to verify what you and Miller and President Trump said?
So me and Miller and all the DOD officials were at the Pentagon on January 6th. Tony Ornato and Chief of Staff Meadows were in the White House. But 2 days before that, all of us were at the White House in the Oval Office And we were talking about a national security project, and that's when President Trump said, I'm authorizing up to 10 to 20,000 National Guardsmen and women, with Chief of Staff Meadows in the room. Chief of Staff Meadows, #1 guy for presidential security, Tony Ornato, sits outside the Oval Office, in a real office, not a Cassidy Hutchinson office. And Ornato communicated with Meadows immediately about President Trump's statement authorizing 10 to 20,000 National Guardsmen and women. This is an apolitical career Secret Service senior officer. This guy has nothing to do with politics. He provided this testimony, critical testimony, to the January 6th committee 2 years ago.
And the January 4th, that would be Sunday for January 2020, correct?
I think so, yeah. It was, can't remember off the top of my head.
Were you in the room? Was the acting Secretary of Defense was there? Were you in the room?
Me, the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Staff to the President of the United States, and probably one other person were all in the Oval Office when the President said it. And the reason this is critical is because Chief of Staff Meadows goes out of the Oval and has an immediate conversation with Tony Ornato about the authorization of National Guard. That's what Tony said.
Okay. So why is you have three officials there? Two of them, you could argue, oh, these are partisan hacks and Kash Patel's crazy. So let's set those aside. But Milley is a known Trump hater, was working with the media at the time, worked with the J6, was a friendly witness to J6, right? Why is the Secret Service guy who's in the anteroom who gets told by Meadows immediately, why is this such a big deal?
Because the media never covered Mark Milley's testimony accurately. Mark Milley had to testify to the truth because he was there when we moved the National Guard in the United States military. He was part of that process. And so he could not obfuscate or dodge the truth, but the media could bury it, which they did, and they just said Mark Milley was the one saving the country that day and talking about his ring of steel and how bad Donald Trump is. He gave them all the ammunition they needed, so no one actually went and read his transcript and the memorandums from the Department of Defense, including the timeline he signed and put out, confirming all of this. So they have now a new official, well, not new, but a new transcript that the Jan 6 committee withheld and suppressed from the American public. And Tony Ornato's testimony clearly shows Donald Trump could not have committed any insurrection because he preemptively, 48 hours before January 6th, authorized 10 to 20,000 National Guard men and women. That shows, in one sentence, Donald Trump's complete exoneration of any insurrection charge, narrative, or what have you, in court or in the public opinion. And that is why the Jan 6 committee suppressed Tony Ornato's transcript, because it sets Donald Trump free.
So help me out here, because I still don't understand. We just had to go to the Supreme Court and have an historic 9-0 decision about the Colorado situation in other states. In Colorado, they essentially took the J6 committee report, and people know that I have a big problem with that legally, right, the J6 committee. But they took the J6 committee report and just put it in as whole cloth as their justification that he was an insurrectionist. So how could we be this far down the road and Trump's lawyers and legal team not all over this crucial piece of evidence, which was Trump 48 hours beforehand on a Sunday afternoon in the Oval Office, directly authorizing the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Chief of Staff of both the White House and the Chief of Staff of the Pentagon, 4 of them, to authorize 10 up to 20,000 troops throughout the country, with 10,000 in Washington, D.C., to make sure nothing happened.
So the president's team had what was publicly available. What the president's, my transcript, the SecDef transcript, the timelines, everything we've put out, Bowser's letter, Capitol Police statement and timeline, rejection of the National Guard, those are all public. But what was withheld The exculpatory piece of evidence that was withheld from the public that no one had till Molly Hemingway found it and forced it out was Tony Ornato's transcript corroborating this entire series of events that we've been putting out for 3+ years now. And that's why they didn't have it. Also, the Colorado Supreme Court case where I was a lead witness for President Trump, that judge, just like the January 6th committee, suppressed evidence of innocence and exculpatory information. They didn't put in all the material you and I have been talking about because they did not want that in the record. They excluded critical components of testimony that showed President Trump authorized 10 to 20,000 National Guard, and no one had this Tony Ornato transcript. Otherwise, it should and would have been put in by Trump's legal team in the record. And I think the committee that Loudermilk is running right now is going to put out even more stuff next week. This is just the beginning. And this is the highlight to show people, voters, that the government interfered.
You know, God bless Loudermilk, and he's doing a good job, but he's a backbencher. Let's be honest. I mean, this is why Johnson and McCarthy should have reauthorized this committee. Let the Democrats, let little Jamie Raskin be the ranking member. Let them have Goldman or whoever they want as counsel. Let them rip apart all the, it's the American legal system. It's an adversary system. Let them rip apart the evidence. Let them rip apart, let them cross-examine you, Cash, like you have been at the grand jury. But just get on with it. This is why we need the American people putting it out through Loudermilk's thing. It's fine, but it's kind of Grundunish. We need to get serious about this because correct me if I'm wrong. Did not the evidence show 3 significant people in this drama? Milley as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House, and Mayor Bowser as the mayor of Washington, D.C., all actively, through their actions, thwarted Donald J. Trump from actually providing the necessary security you need on January 6th, sir.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what's going to be highlighted in our film, Government Gangsters. This is why this is so critical. The left's mission to take out Donald Trump is based on the insurrection narrative. And just like we did in Russiagate, we use the left's own evidence to destroy their narrative. Like you highlighted, Pelosi rejected Donald Trump's authorization of the National Guard through the Capitol Police. Bowser rejected Donald Trump's National Guard authorization directly in writing. We have those letters. They're in the book. They're going to be in the movie. And Mark Milley and the SecDef were all there to witness it and testify that Donald Trump authorized it. If Donald Trump did in fact authorize it, which he did, it is constitutionally impossible for him to commit insurrection in any way, shape, or form. The only insurrectionists are the Nancy Pelosi's and Mayor Bowser's of the world and this January Unselect Committee. This is just like Russiagate, where they buried evidence of innocence. The FBI buried Donald Trump's exoneration here in January 6th in the insurrection narrative that the radical left has been trotting out with the deep state government gangsters. They themselves, the committee, buried evidence of innocence, which directly corroborates from a senior Secret Service official that Donald Trump authorized 10 to 20,000 National Guards, men and women, days before January 6th. And that destroys their insurrection narrative, exonerates Donald Trump. That's why they buried it. That's why Molly Hemingway's great reporting just released it. She was fervent. She stayed on mission. And that is why they don't want to talk about the truth of January 6th, which is Donald Trump would have and acted to secure every measure in D.C. and around the country. And the only people that thwarted it were Nancy Pelosi, Mayor Bowser, the Capitol Police.
That's all for today. Thank you. If you want global news to keep you up to date on any new developments, please subscribe our channel and forward our content with your friends on social media and email. Thank you very much for keep supporting me. Stay safe, be blessed. Namaste.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.